Ramin Faraz film that came out in the theater. If it's still showing near you, I highly recommend you go and watch because it's a true heroic tale and also too just a little twist on what we normally see in Hindi cinema. This is a really nuanced, story about some radical views within Islam as well as the brainwashing of kids to spread that message. But we're going to go into a little bit of a different type of a review. We're talking about a series that came out on Netflix. It's actually a remake of a Spanish series called Elite. We're talking about Class. Now, Class came out on Netflix, and I gotta say, this is something I personally enjoyed watching because there are a lot of things I believe that occur in I would say the society of the children of the elite in these wealthy private schools. There's this sort of like nuanced world that we got to explore. So as I said, Class is a remake of the Spanish television series Elite, and in the first episode we're brought right into this scene where we think someone's getting murdered. It seems that there's a murder or someone's in trouble, and then all of a sudden flashbacks and we're introduced to our three main characters. So in Class, it takes place in a private school. I believe it was called the Hampton International School in New Delhi, and it follows the lives of five families as they navigate through a complex world filled with class, culture classes, clashes, values, secrets, and violence. As well as that, a lot of our main characters are from, what you could say the other side of the tracks. They're going to the school on scholarship, but they're not from a very wealthy background. In fact, they're from a very adverse background. And so they come into the school and the environment is not very friendly towards them because, as I said, the Hampton International School in New Delhi has a lot of kids from very wealthy backgrounds. A lot of these kids are being portrayed as, very snobbish towards kids with an adverse background, very elitism. There's talks about class or about caste and everything in this. So the environment's very hostile towards these three. And, as we kind of go throughout this series, it's bringing you not only the world in which these three characters are in, but starting to navigate through this path where you see it just becoming a little bit more violent. Like there's friendships, there's betrayals, and as the series progresses, we're getting closer and closer to that first episode where someone was getting murdered. What could possibly lead someone, especially in a very privileged school such as Hampton International, to lead to a murder? That's kind of what I was asking myself, as I was watching this, and ultimately what kept me on the edge of the seat. I think one good strength of this too is all the characters are they're pretty well rounded. Each of them had a little thing about them that was kind of problematic. So they weren't like these perfect characters. Even the kids that were coming from adverse backgrounds on the scholarships, they weren't always like the victim in the narratives. Sometimes they had their own flaws too. Technically as well, I think one thing this film does really well is its color palette. Visually, this is a very nice series to watch. If you're there for just good display, good visuals, this is the one for you. Just take a look at the Netflix, cover. It's kind of pulling on, not only a good color scheme, but it's also bringing up this digital social media type world, appearance, and very much, shows in the show. As well as that, it's a very immersive world. You're brought into this international school and you almost feel like you're part of the school. I think, and what was the previous Netflix series we watched that you and Shreya really liked? It took place in a high school. I think it was Never Have I Ever.
Never Have I Ever.
Right? And in that, it was very similar to what this did because in Never Have I Ever, you guys were very engaged with the characters, their backstories, and all the development that occurred. There were all these little things season by season. You'd be able to watch the characters grow. And I think this is something that Class might be able to achieve, with more seasons. It also tackles very complex themes such as poverty, wealth gap, gender, sexuality, caste. Actually, I think this series was much more friendly on the LGBTQ side as compared to other series we've seen in the Hindiverse. So, props to that. And ultimately, I think the director, who is Ashim Aliwala, does an excellent job of, balancing these themes, presenting them in a way, where it's not really forced. It's very normalized. It's very targeted towards a Gen Z audience and very relevant. The only thing I might criticize about this is there are some times in the script where it feels very crude. It feels very artificial. So a lot of times between characters, whether they're making fun of, the kids for being, like poor, not coming from a wealthy background. A lot of these interactions sometimes feel very, I would say, extreme. Like the way sometimes they're being treated does feel artificial. It doesn't really feel sometimes that would happen in real life, but also like when they really lean into that like extreme side of things, like it honestly kept me kind of interested throughout the entire film. Like, had they maybe been a little bit more down to earth or a little bit more grounded in their approach, I may have lost interest. So, it is a criticism I've seen in other reviews, but I will say that like that extremism that they take with some of these interactions honestly kept me very engaged, because I really did have a true hatred towards some of the characters in this film. I also just want to give a shout out to all the actors in this. I mean, there's so many to name, but I would say some of the titular roles are like, and please correct the pronunciation here, but Gufarte, Perzada, Piyush Kati, and Anjali as Sivaram. Those are just like the first three I would like to kind of like shout out there. But all these young actors, really delivered like powerful performances. Like, I don't know if any of these were necessarily household names or like really big actors that we've seen before, but they really did feel like an ensemble. I mean, they had good chemistry together. And I just gotta give props to that, because they really stole the show. Similar, like I said, in Never Have I Ever. Like, you have an ensemble cast here. Some of them are people that are kind of famous, but mostly they're just a bunch of kids coming together and making a good series. And so I really think if you liked Never Have I Ever, Class would be something that it's a little bit more less on like the love story angle. It's more so on like a lot of these complex problems, a lot of this drama that does happen within some wealthy private institutions. But I won't give any details about what happened at the end of the season, because as I said, all these episodes do lead up to what we were brought in the first season, which was a murder. So this is a thriller, but it's also a very good series that shows, kind of what can happen in some of these societies, the disparity between the wealthy and the poor. If this is something that interests you, highly recommend you binge all these episodes on Netflix.